Children's rights are basic human rights, but with particular interest to the child. So there are the rights which are linked directly to the child. Like the child has a right to live in a safe environment, an environment which is conducive enough for them to excel and things like that. So they are human rights, but in particular interest looking at the child.
Le comité africain d'experts sur les droits et le bien-être de l'enfant a été mis en place en vertu de l'article 32 de la Charte africaine sur les droits et le bien-être de l'enfant pour faire le suivi de la mise en œuvre de la Charte par les États parties. Et dans le cadre de notre travail, nous analysons les rapports des différents États parties, mais également, après l'analyse de ces rapports, nous émettons des recommandations et après un certain temps, nous menons des missions de suivi et évaluation pour voir quel état de mise en œuvre de nos recommandations.
I believe that as every year passes, the capacity of states to protect and promote the rights of the child is getting better. We say that a child born today is most probably better than a child born yesterday or last year, and definitely much better than a child that was born 30 years ago when the Convention on the Rights of the Child was adopted and when the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child was adopted.
This year we celebrated the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and next year we celebrate the commemoration of the African Charter at 30 years. In terms of milestones, the African child has become more visible in that their rights are better protected, and also through the work of the committees, especially let me speak about the African Committee, there has been so much outreach through the work of the committee, and also at the state parties level, there are so many programs that have been introduced to enhance the protection and promotion of children's rights.
Safeguarding the rights and welfare of the African child is something that we, as a committee members, we care about, and we have seen that a lot have been conducted so far since those two instruments were ratified, and almost most of the countries ratified them. A lot have been conducted, as I mentioned, and the children now are right bearers, and they know their rights, they can participate and they can be heard, they have the opportunity to dream for a better future.
I believe the African leaders signed up to the Charter to reinforce their commitment to the implementation and the guaranteeing protection, promotion of the fundamental freedoms and the rights of every child on the African continent.
The committee, they have been working tirelessly with other organizations and partners in order to improve the life of children in Africa. So the change that we want to see is to improve the education system in Africa, the protection system, because here I can say I am protected, I'm feeling at least home.
The existing frameworks actually provide us with an excellent opportunity for doing more. The challenge remains their consistent implementation in situations of conflict and also in other developmental contexts. My sense is that one of the things that we need on the continent is to consistently come together under a common framework that helps us, that is based on our core commitments for children.
The Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. So what we want is nothing for us without us. We want to participate. Right now there are children living in conflict regions like the DRC. I'm not from the DRC, but I may have solutions on what those children, how those children could be saved. I have a better understanding on what they're going through. I'm a child, so I understand what the other child is going through. So in the next 30 years, if the world embraces the inner child in the whole world, I think we'll be creating a better solution.
Children's rights are basic human rights, but with particular interest to the child. So there are the rights which are linked directly to the child. Like the child has a right to live in a safe environment, an environment which is conducive enough for them to excel and things like that. So they are human rights, but in particular interest looking at the child.
Presence of the distinguished delegates from Angola, Botswana, Malawi, Lesotho, South Africa, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. And we will start like we have now taken the habit, that is to have a presentation of the status of the implementation of the Charter and Agenda 2040 by Southern Africa region member states. And we will have this presentation with Musa Vengana Kibwana, who is from the Secretariat, who will take 20 minutes. And then we will give the floor to Honorable Have to moderate that session with the presentations from member states, and Honorable Mashamba Clement, who will lead the session with the National Human Rights Institutes, the representative of SADC and partner organizations. And without much further ado, I give the floor to Dr. Musa Vengana Kibwana. You have the floor.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, for the opportunity to make this presentation. I greet you from the mountain kingdom of Lesotho. I'm in Maseru. So I will start my presentation. The outline of the presentation is that we're going to review, like you rightly mentioned, using the same format that we've been presenting since Monday. We'll reflect on the Charter ratification and reservations by the region and the reporting status. Then we'll flag a few highlights on the implementation of Agenda 2040, looking specifically at the legislative measures that have been put in place, the issues of birth registration, then focus on some specific themes such as birth registration, the right to health, access to basic necessities, the right to education, violence against children, and child-friendly justice system. So that's the structure of the presentation, Honorable. And the countries that we're going to be talking about are specifically 10. We know that in SADC, for to use the SADC delimitation, it may be more than these countries, but for the purpose of this presentation, we are focusing specifically on these 10, sorry. So in terms of ratification, I think in our region, Southern Africa, ratification is not a problem at all, because all the 10 countries in question have ratified the Charter. And the second column there shows the years when ratification was done, with Angola being one of the first signatories to the Charter in 1992. But beyond ratification, Honorable, we have a challenge in terms of reporting. Indeed, all the countries have submitted their initial reports except for Botswana. As you can see in the third column, where we're talking about dates when the reports were submitted. Angola has submitted its initial report in 2015. Botswana has not yet submitted its initial report. Lesotho, Malawi, Mozambique, Namibia, South Africa, Eswatini, Zambia, and Zimbabwe have all submitted their initial reports. South Africa, however, is the only country that has gone a step further to submit its first periodic report. That's why I have highlighted there. So reporting, Honorable, is not a challenge in reporting is a challenge in Southern Africa, because the amount of time also that has been taken for the initial reports to be submitted has been a lot. So now I'm focusing on the last column where we're talking about when the next reports are going to be due. If this schedule that we have prepared is anything to go by, in this coming year, we're likely supposed to be inundated with reports from states parties in Southern Africa. And we are hoping that Botswana will be the first one to submit its initial report in this coming year, as well as Lesotho, our host here, Malawi, Mozambique. Its first periodic report has been due since 2018. Namibia as well, it has been due. Eswatini as well. Zambia recently submitted its initial report, so the first periodic report will be due in 2022. And Zimbabwe has been due since last year to submit its first periodic report. Also sufficing to mention that of these countries, all of them have submitted reports to the CRC at least twice. I think Angola tops the list. It has submitted several reports to the CRC. But I think perhaps we can have a conversation around the challenges that may be there in submitting to the committee, whilst it is not a problem to submit to the CRC with at least 2 reports from each of the countries. I have flagged there at the bottom that Botswana has entered a reservation in its ratification of the Charter in 2001. Botswana entered a reservation on the definition of the child. I think, as we shall see, perhaps they've revoked that reservation in terms of their national laws, but in principle, they have a reservation in terms of the definition of the child as given by Article 2 of the Charter. I'll go to the domestication of the provisions of the Charter in the 10 countries in question, and only 3 countries follow the monist regime of legislation. It's Angola, Mozambique, and Namibia. So, like one of our colleague from the Secretariat yesterday mentioned, and previously also, that the monist state means that ratified treaties such as the Charter will automatically be part of and parcel of the domestic legal system and will prevail over national legislation in cases of conflict of these laws. And theoretically, it was that the Charter can be used in the court of law to get justice for children. But the majority of the states in Southern Africa are dualists, which means that when the state has ratified the Charter, it has to go through an act of parliament for it to be domesticated. So it's not automatic that ratification means enforcement. So we have seen through jurisprudence that it has some persuasive value in the courts of law. In terms of constitutionalization of rights in the 10 countries in question, we observe that reference to children is done in all the constitutions except only in Botswana. So you'll find that all the constitutions of state parties make mention of children within their constitutions except for in the Bill of Rights. There are several countries that have put within the Bill of Rights a section on children's rights, namely Eswatini, Malawi, Mozambique, Namibia, South Africa, Zambia, and Zimbabwe, which means children's rights as encapsulated in the Charter and domesticated through the Bill of Rights are justiciable in these countries. Further to that, all the countries in Southern Africa
Bon, je ne crois pas en français, c'est bien, je ne sais pas en anglais s'il y a un problème, mais en français, ça marche.
Translation?
Yes, we have a problem with French chair or French. Are you there? Portuguese? Okay, good. Chair. I think the interpretation is going well.
So, Musa, you can proceed.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Chair. So, in the 10 countries, we find that all the 10 countries have, to varying degrees, come up with laws that domesticate the charter, as can be seen by Angola, Botswana, Eswatini, Lesotho, Malawi, Mozambique, Namibia, South Africa, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. They have specific also laws on children. We are aware, though, that in Zimbabwe, the Children's Act is still being revised to be in line with the Constitution of 2013. In terms of the definition of the child, Chair, I think I'll flag here Botswana because they entered the reservation on the definition of the child. That's row number 2 on the countries. Botswana, whilst it entered reservation on the definition of the child according to the charter, but the laws that they have put in place are all observing the dictates of the charter. They are working with the definition of 18 as the age, and as well they provide a higher threshold in terms of minimum age of sexual consent. Also, they put it at 18. While some of the countries which had no reservation on the definition of the child have put the threshold even lower to 16. Some of the countries, and the age of employment, Botswana works with the ILO threshold of 14, and in terms of recruitment into the army, they work with 18. I think overall, countries in the region follow the provisions of the charter in terms of definition of the child, except the Angola, Eswatini, and Zambia, who are yet to revise their definitions to suit the uncompromising definition that is provided by the charter, because they are using the CRC definition. Now to birth registration. Now my presentation is going to be focusing on specific themes that are provided for in Agenda 2040. The aspiration on birth registration is that birth registration is to be universal, compulsory, and free. This is the aspiration of Agenda 2040 in all the countries, that birth registration is universal, compulsory, and free. But in analysis that we have done of the countries in our region, we find that through the legislations that we have alluded to, birth registration is indeed mandatory in all Southern African countries. And some of the countries impose sanctions on non-registration of children. But still we find that with these provisions, there is a birth registration average of the region is at 40%, which means there are impediments in the process of birth registration which have to be dealt with, whilst the law is providing for mandatory registration and imposition of sanctions for those who would not have registered their children. So we find that some of these sanctions are in making birth registration not universally free. For example, in Eswatini, levies are charged for one to ensure a birth registration of 60 elangeni. So some of the families may not be in a position to afford the 60 elangeni, considering the competing priorities for the family. So here the aspiration is for universal, compulsory, and free. But you're finding that in some of the countries, it is not free. In South Africa and Lesotho, they have a unique provision within their laws where they provide for descent-based system for conferring citizenship and nationality. So what they do is that if a child is born in South Africa to foreign parents, they do not automatically become South African nationals. It is assumed that they take the nationality of the country where the parents are from. Meanwhile, this situation raises a lot of stateless children in that the countries where the children are, where the parents are from, may not be recognizing the same children. Hence, they are found in limbo. In terms of the right to education, the overall aspiration to benefit from quality free education. But what we find on the continent is that early childhood education has been found to be neglected in most Southern African countries, and yet it deserves special attention, considering how much it is it builds a foundation for the future of each country. We also observed in our research that gender parity has been largely achieved on enrollments, especially in primary schools, but as we go to secondary schools onwards, there seems to be a disparity not favoring the girl child. So the girl children drop off from school when it comes to secondary school, whilst in primary school, the gender parity seems largely to be at equilibrium. So we observe that the education of the girl child is still at risk of several disruptions, such as child marriages, teenage pregnancies, and the falling off on the statistics of the girl child, especially as we progress to secondary school, is because of some of these reasons given here. So now we go to the issue of how the right to education is treated in the laws of the countries in Southern Africa. We find that in all the aspiration, remember, is to have free, compulsory, and inclusive education. In terms of the primary education being free, all African countries except for Mozambique and South Africa make the primary education free. Being free and compulsory, we find that Angola, Botswana, Lesotho, Malawi, Namibia, Swaziland, Zambia, and Zimbabwe provide within their laws for primary education to be free and compulsory. Free, compulsory, and inclusive, we find that within the laws, Angola, Lesotho, Namibia, and Zambia provide for that. For the right to inclusive education to be provided for in the constitution, Angola is the one that provides for that within its national constitution. For the right to inclusive education provided for in the Education Act, we find Zambia providing for that. For the right to inclusive education provided for in the Children's Act, Namibia provides for that. For the right to inclusive education provided for in education policies, we find Lesotho, Namibia, and Malawi. So then the status on the re-entry for the girls who would have gotten pregnant, we find that there is conditional re-entry policies in most of the Southern African countries, such as Botswana, Malawi, Mozambique, Namibia, South Africa, at the health outcomes on Agenda 2040, the aspiration is for every child to survive, number one, and to have a healthy childhood, number two. So there are several variables that are at play. So one of them is to make sure that every state has developed some policy related to healthcare and programs aimed at ensuring better access to quality healthcare services for all the children. This is where we have a problem. We discovered through our research that in Southern Africa, whilst the policies are in place for survival and a healthy childhood for each child, but the challenges on availability, accessibility, acceptability, and the quality. Because for the greater part, these are not entrenched with. However, universal health coverage for children remains a challenge. Primary healthcare services are not extended free of charge and not accessible in many countries in the region. To be providing for it indeed in the laws, but then the quality is not uniform across the country. So in rural and remote areas, compared to the urban areas, healthcare centers are not accessible to in some of the rural and remote areas. I think that's the point I've been making. What you are also seeing within the health scope is that there's an increased rate of malnutrition in some of the countries and an increase in infant and maternal mortality rates. Remember, the aspiration is healthy childhood. But then this will not happen when there's an availability of safe drinking water, when there's inadequate sanitation facilities, mostly in rural areas. So in Southern Africa, one of the fundamental issues that have to be addressed is inequality, because indeed the resources are available, indeed the quality may be there, but it's not uniform, hence the inequality we are talking about. Also, the healthy childhood will not be possible with the inadequacy of healthcare facilities and lack of qualified health personnel. In terms of sexual reproductive health and rights, we discovered that the services are not readily available in most countries, and only South Africa has laws and policies in place that allow adolescents to access SRH services without third-party authorization. For most countries, there has to be third-party authorizations. So now, linked to SRHR provisions, we looked at how the laws deal with the issues of termination of pregnancies. We find that in Malawi, it's allowed when the pregnancy is a danger to the life of the mother. Termination of pregnancy is allowed in Malawi when the pregnancy is a danger to the life of the mother. In Angola, Namibia, and Botswana, termination of pregnancy is allowed on health grounds. In Namibia as well, Angola, Lesotho, and Eswatini, it's allowed at least on one of the grounds of rape, incest, and fetal impairment. In South Africa, it's allowed upon parental consent. Now I'm moving on to the theme of violence against children. We discover that violence against children is widespread in the region, specifically in the home, in the school, in communities, in workplaces, even in alternative care, as well as in justice systems. And girls are at a greater risk of this violence, physically, emotional treatment, sexual abuse, neglect, and exploitation. I think violence against children within the context of gender-based violence suits very well with the 16 activism against gender-based violence. And we find that girls are disproportionately affected. One of the ways in which girls are disproportionately affected is through child marriages. So we looked at the child marriage laws that are within the region. We find that in Botswana, Malawi, Swaziland, Zambia, and Zimbabwe, there is criminalization of child marriages. In Angola, Mozambique, Namibia, and South Africa, the legislative approach is that subjecting the child marriage to invalidation without penal sanctions. In Lesotho, provision of the minimum age of marriage only without stipulating the consequences. So the minimum age of marriage has been provided for in Lesotho, but not necessarily the consequence of defying that. And in Angola, exceptions to the minimum age of marriage, for example, where consent is granted, approval by a judge or other public official. In Zambia, minimum age of marriage below the age of 18 and discriminating between girls and boys. So in Zambia, there seems to still to be the discrimination between girls and boys, but we look forward to the new bill that Zambia is developing. I think it will be addressing some of these irregularities. Then in terms of state of corporal punishment in Southern Africa, we find that in South Africa, it is outlawed in all settings, from family to school, to work environment, to alternative care places, as well as a form of justice. Several countries have prohibited also as a sentence of crime in the region. And in Botswana, Lesotho, it's not prohibited in the penal justice system. In Lesotho, again, it's prohibited in schools. In Botswana, corporal punishment has not been prohibited at all. And in Zimbabwe, it's prohibited. Now, in terms of, sorry, Chair, in terms of how the child-friendly justice systems, in Lesotho, Malawi, and South Africa, there are laws establishing children's courts or child-friendly benches where no specialized courts exist. And protection of children from pretrial detention, we find that in Malawi, Namibia, only to be placed in a place of safety. In South Africa, it's prohibited. In Zimbabwe, only to be put in remand homes. Provision of legal aid for children, it's found in Malawi, and it's mandatory in South Africa as well as in Zambia. Laws establishing diversion of children, we find these laws in Lesotho, in Malawi, in South Africa, and Zimbabwe. Laws protecting child victims and witnesses, we find these in Malawi, in South Africa, and in Zimbabwe. Now, in terms of child participation, the aspiration according to Agenda 2040 is for the views of the African children to matter, which means that they are given due weight and they are considered in decisions that affect the children. So the aspiration is still far from being achieved on the African continent. Children's voices still need to be heard and to be given the due weight in matters that concern them. But however, we have an exemplary practice here in South Africa. We are just giving as an example. We know that in many of the countries here present, there are a plethora of good examples that we could have used to make this point. But however, in South Africa, the Children's Act of 2005 provides for provincial children's parliaments. Further, a Children's Rights Committee was established in 2016 within the South Africa Human Rights Commission, and with a mandate to monitor and assess the observance of human rights, particularly children's rights. So for us, this is a good example because normatively, it's embedded within the laws of the country, and it is financed as well by public resources to make sure that children participate in issues that concern them. Thank you, Chair. That will be the presentation from the Secretariat pertaining to Agenda 2040 in Southern Africa. Over to you.
Merci, Moussa Chibwana, pour cette présentation. Je ne sais pas si je vois Avel Tali. Honorable Avel, you have the floor. Tenant compte excusez un tout petit moment, honorable Ave. Tenant compte de la
Yes,
liste des délégations, je ne sais pas, je ne crois pas qu'on pourra peut-être trouver une occasion pour pouvoir échanger avec les États.
Opportunity to ask questions, to have a discussion. So let us allow the delegations to make their presentations. So, Honorable Ave, you have the floor.
okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It's unfortunate I lost my translation here, so I did not hear your last comments or instructions. But I will just go ahead and follow you to join you to thank Dr. Musa
Mon dernier commentaire, c'était.
My last comment was to allow the various distinguished delegations or delegates to make their presentations. We have a long list of speakers. We will have discussion after presentations. Presentations first before discussion.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Once again, I don't have interpretation for that, but now I'm going to call on the representative of Angola to give us an update, a briefing on what has been done in Angola on the implementation of the charter, including what actions, what challenges, and what opportunities. The representative of Angola is Dr. Paulo Calesi, who is the National Director of the National Children's Institute of Angola. You'll be talking for 10 minutes only. You have the floor now.
Excelência, Senhor Presidente.
Your Excellency, Mr. Chairperson, Honorable Joseph Ndajisenga, honorable members of this committee, distinguished representatives of civil society organizations, ladies and gentlemen, and distinguished guests. It is a great honor for Angola to participate in the 36th session, which is celebrating the 30th anniversary of the adoption of the African Charter of Children's Rights and Children's Wellbeing. The Angolan state is committed and engaged in the protection of human rights and more specifically children's rights. According to the data that has been presented through our 2014 population census, children in Angola represent 53%, 53.1% of the total population, which is estimated at 15,542,522 people. So as I've mentioned, 58% are actually children between 5 and 18 years of age, and 35% are children under the age of 5. In terms of the number of children in households, it's about 19%. Children under the age of 5 represent 32.8% of. In terms of access to educational services, we estimate that this year a total of 6,118,913 children were registered for school, of which 875,723 were registered for grade 1, and 6 million were registered for primary school. 3 million 715,951 children were registered for the first time ever. In order to ensure the effective protection of children's human rights, the Angolan government has adopted Presidential Decree 123, 14th of April, which contains the national strategy for the protection of human rights. It includes various public policies in the area of human rights, and it includes a plan of action that needs to be carried out with the objective of trying to ensure that most of the people in Angola can benefit from human rights. The first step is to ensure that everybody is seen as legitimate as Angolans, which means that we need to assess ourselves, we need to correct ourselves, and we need to condemn any weakness or failure in the area of human rights at national level. Besides the strategy, we have a national plan for the combating of human trafficking. And we have Presidential Decree of the 14th of February 2020, which includes the combating of human trafficking, more specifically that of children and women. The National Directorate of Human Rights has strengthened all the commitments that have been accepted and assumed by Angola, both in terms of its national, regional, and international commitments. Our strategy is focused on trying to carry out all the African Union treaties on human rights, namely the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, the Protocol to the African Union's Charter on Human and People's Rights, the Protocol on the Protection of Women's Rights in Africa, the African Charter for Children's Wellbeing and Rights, as well as the Charter on the Protection of Refugees, the African Convention on the Protection and Assistance to all those that work in Africa and live in Africa. Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen, this session is being carried out at a moment when Africa and the world find themselves affected significantly by the COVID-19 pandemic, which has actually caused a significant loss of life and has completely changed the way of life of our populations. The information bulletin regarding a COVID-19 situation in Angola indicates that there's been 14,752 confirmed cases, of which 338 deaths. We all agree that the COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted all the weaknesses in the international systems of coordination and engagement regarding challenges and natural calamities, natural disasters, and other disasters. So we appeal for the participation of everybody, more specifically of governments, to ensure that we can best enjoy our human rights and that we can best fight against COVID-19. So the fight against this pandemic is our imperative in order to ensure the development of our societies. Your Excellencies, allow me to inform you that the Angolan state continues to work very hard to fight against COVID-19. We have taken proactive measures to not only protect children whilst this pandemic continues, but thereafter as well. As an example, as soon as a world pandemic was declared, His Excellency, the Presidency of the Republic, immediately created the Interministerial Committee for COVID-19 control and approved the National Contingency Plan for the control of the coronavirus pandemic. Amongst all the measures that were adopted, we include the mandatory quarantine observance at home of all people that come into the country from countries that have got significantly high COVID-19 infection rates. We've also defined all the measures that have to be applied, such as, for example, the control of the propagation of the COVID-19 pandemic through a declaration of a new state of emergency. Our state of emergency has been extended 4 times. So it carried on for 60 days. After that, we declared a state of national disaster based on Law 1420 of the 4th of May, which basically changes our basic civil protection law. It contains all the measures for the control of pandemics and makes legal all the restrictions that we need to apply on the population. As a result of a lockdown, various measures were taken to try and alleviate the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on all our companies, as well as the tax agencies and the households. So we have made available 315 million kwanza to the Ministry of Social Action, Promotion of Human Rights in order to ensure the access to food products of our basic food basket for all our most vulnerable families. We've distributed water freely. We've strengthened our social action system. We've ensured cash transfers to the most vulnerable families, and we've ensured the implementation of a social assistance program at temporary level that allows the disbursement to families of 8,500 kwanza, especially for families that are very vulnerable, as well as their inclusion in activities that can generate income for the families. Apologies, but we've lost the sound of the gentleman. Since the child is very important, the government has carried out various actions through the National Institute for the Rights of Children. Apologies, I've lost the sound of the gentleman again. So we've created a emergency telephone line called SOS Children, which ensures that since its inception, children can call this number when they are in some sort of crisis, and we've received 100,000 whistleblowing calls in which children tell us, or somebody tells us, about domestic violence or about any sort of violence against children. We've also got another project which has allowed a cash transfer to the parents of children as part of the social actions, which ensures that we can transform the basic social assistance system to ensure that children get support. We've also created centers for quarantine and for shelter of children during the COVID-19 period. And we ensured that children can be protected, especially when families are... I'm terribly sorry, but there's noise.
Thank you.
So the development of flows, as well as the defining of how children should be received in these centers. We have gathered 800 children that were living in the streets. Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen, at the moment, we have taken various measures to ensure that children can return to school in safety and that they can continue to benefit from their right to education. We've also created Cinema Kandema, which is movie houses that allow children to be entertained and to relax slightly from the stress that they live at the moment. Can Madam Rosalie in September please put off her mic? We have various measures that have been taken to ensure that children can be protected against domestic violence. We've also strengthened the possibility of children being able to present complaints against any sort of person that commits violence against them. And we have basically carried out various actions through the committee that was created by the presidents for the benefit and the protection of children's rights. Chairperson, I'd like to end with an appeal. Let us stay home. Let us stay safe. Let our children be blessed. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Kalesi, for that presentation on the status of the implementation of the Charter in Angola. Now we will listen to the representative of government of Botswana, who is Ms. Okaome Moka Batebe. Please pardon me if my pronunciation is not perfect, but we will be taking your report on the status of the implementation of the Charter in Botswana. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. I hope I'm audible enough. Hello? Yes. Maybe just by providing a brief background on child rights implementation in Botswana, to highlight that Botswana has adopted the National Development Plan, NDP 11, which has taken children's rights mainstreaming into consideration in line with the National Vision 2036 and Sustainable Development Agenda of 2030. Implementation of regional and international obligations also forms part of the National Delivery Mechanism, which is coordinated by the Office of the President through the National Human Rights Office that was established in 2018. With regards to the obligations that we have entered, that are contained under the Charter, Botswana has acceded to the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child in July 2001, as highlighted by the previous speaker. We entered into a reservation to Article 2, whose object relates to the definition of the child. We continue with efforts towards full ratification, and we have reviewed different pieces of legislation to bring them into accord with the treaty. With the different treaties, one of them being the ACRWC, insofar as the definition of the child is concerned. The Children's Act of 2009, which is the principal legislation for the protection of the rights of children, was the first efforts towards domesticating the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the child. The Penal Code of Botswana has also been amended and one of the reasons why it was amended in the first place was to align it to the provisions under the Children's Act, one of which is the definition of the child and also the raising the age of consent. The adoption of Children's Act is also under review, and the aim is to bring it into compliance with regards to matters of protecting persons defined as children. And therefore, in recognition of the milestones that we have achieved so far, and the fact that there are no legal impediments to lifting the reservation, we are now ready to withdraw the reservation, and the process for that withdrawal has already commenced. We are hoping to have lifted the reservation by the end of the next year, in 2021. We have also enacted the Anti-Human Trafficking Act in 2015, and it was subsequently reviewed in 2018. This act further provided for the protection of human trafficking victims, and there's also a specific component that has been included under the Anti-Human Trafficking Act of 2015. We are in the process of developing a sexual offences bill, and the consultations on the draft are ongoing. The draft bill is in place, and one of the things that are provided for under this draft bill is to facilitate for the protection of children and other vulnerable groups, including, among other things, for barring of people who have committed offenses against these vulnerable groups to not be employed in institutions where those vulnerable people are being taken care of. And we are also in the process of establishing child-friendly police stations. By the beginning of April 2021, we would have identified the different police stations that will be piloting this initiative as a way of trying to improve facilitation of justice for children in Botswana. It has been reported earlier on that we are yet to submit the report, the initial report on the implementation of the ACRWC. We have since drafted a report and is pending finalization, and we are hoping to submit very soon. We will be among the first countries to submit in the coming year. In terms of the coordination of the mandate for child protection, the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development is the one that is which is coordinating all efforts towards the promotion of children's rights. The coordination of human rights is overseen by the Office of the President, as highlighted earlier on, while monitoring, coordination, and advocacy for implementation of child rights are done through the National Children's Council, which is a structure that is established by the Children's Act of 2009 and is accountable to the minister responsible for child welfare. They report on a quarterly basis to the minister on activities that they are doing in terms of the mandate that is stipulated under the Children's Act. The other structures that are established under the Children's Act to facilitate the protection of children's rights is the Children's Consultative Forum, which is a structure through which we facilitate the participation of children in matters of policy, in matters of programming, as well as legislation and other matters that affect their welfare. And the membership of this forum comprises of children from all the districts in Botswana. So all districts are represented, and in terms of inclusion, all districts are supposed to have children who have disabilities. Children with disabilities have to be represented. Boys and girls have to be represented on an equal basis, and all other considerations that point to inclusion of all children are considered when those children are elected into the forum. And by the way, children are elect themselves. It's not a forum through which we identify the members themselves. Children elect themselves as representatives in this forum. There's also the Village Child Protection Committee, whose mandate is to educate communities on child neglect, ill-treatment, exploitation, and other abuse of children, and the laws and conventions governing them, such as the Children's Act, the CRC, and the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of Children. This structure was meant to facilitate participation in child protection at the very local level. What we normally say is that we're just trying to make children's business everybody's business, so that everybody seems to be playing a role. Communities play a role, because they are the ones that house the children, and that is where a lot of activities take place. That is where all the abuses are done. That is where also protection is supposed to be facilitated. Therefore, there's a need to engage them in child protection. In terms of allocation of resources, Botswana does not have a mechanism through which a dedicated budget is allocated for children. However, different line ministries are given budgeting for children is still made through different line ministries as per their mandate. We have ministries responsible for delivery of different components of child protection, being the Ministry of Health and Wellness, the Ministry of Basic Education, the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development. And I must say that these are the ministries which are among the top 5 that get the biggest share of the national budget. We continue to engage with the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development to facilitate dedicated child budgets. What are we doing with our sectors? We have partnerships. We work with civil society organizations. We have a child rights network that we as the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development work very closely with. We have recently, just last week, commemorated the Child Protection Week together. And some of the organizations, we have a memoranda of understanding with them. And some of the areas of cooperation with these societies is to complement local level structures to, among other things, disseminate child rights information and deliver complementary services, and also to provide a residential care for those children that are in need of protection. In order to facilitate and to ensure that they continue implementing, they are able to continue implementing the areas of cooperation, we provide them with annual subventions to facilitate the support that we have agreed on. In terms of information dissemination and campaign, we have taken decisive measures to create awareness through public campaigns, the most recent of which is the one that we have called it Isimawane, which loosely translated, it just means touch not the child. This is a very powerful campaign that we are doing jointly with UNICEF Botswana Country Office. We have reached out to many different districts, and one of the targets people that we have under the
hello, Madam, you have just 1 minute left, please.
Pardon?
Please, could you wind down? You have just 1 minute.
Okay. We are also doing the hashtag Section 25 campaign, which is spearheaded by the National Children's Council. One of the main aim of that campaign is to promote reporting, and especially since under the Children's Act there's a provision for mandatory reporting of child abuse, neglect, and any other form of exploitation for the child. In terms of child justice reform, we are in the process, as I earlier on, of establishing child-friendly police station, and also there are consultations reviewing the child justice system, which is multi-sectoral. Response to emerging issues, my colleague from Angola has talked about the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. We in Botswana have also been affected, and we have noted compromised access to children. To children's education, they have the access to protective services has also been compromised, especially since children were exposed to abuse within the home where they were confined. Access to health was also compromised because a lot of children had to stay home. There was also the aspect of loss of household income because some of the caregivers had to stay home and could not go home and try to get a living. So some of the interventions that we have in place to respond to this is that we have availed alternative education through national TV. We have provided schools material to parents to facilitate homeschooling. We have also enforced compliance to COVID-19 protocols as a condition for reopening in all schools, government and private institutions, as an effort to control spread and to facilitate a safe return to schools following the lockdowns. We have also scaled up helpline services, which we are doing in partnership with our civil societies. We have supported households who have become food insecure as a result of the pandemic. The country has also supported businesses that have been affected by the pandemic by providing some subventions, and we also continue to provide psychosocial support services to all people that are admitted in quarantine, and that also includes children, and also facilitating lodging for those children that are placed under mandatory quarantine. In conclusion, I would like to say that Botswana has achieved notable success in the alignment of laws to the Charter, and we pledged our readiness to leave the reservation to the article and pertaining to the definition of the child, and also we reaffirm our commitment to the promotion of the rights and welfare of the child, and we continue to strengthen regional cooperation to support this endeavor. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Madam, for that brief but very informative briefing on the progress of the charter in Botswana. I'm not sure we have a confirmation from Eswatini, and so we will call on the representative of Lesotho, who is Mrs. Mantawa Sejake, the Acting Director, Child Protection in the Ministry of Social Development. Madam, you are welcome. You have 10 minutes to give us a brief on the progress of the implementation of the charter in your country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam. I'll be very quick, though we have so many things to share when it comes to child protection. As we have mentioned, I work in the Ministry of Social Development in the Child Protection Unit, acting in the Director Child Protection Office. Let me just give a brief a background that Lesotho, we ratified the African Charter on the 27th September 1999. And our population is estimated at around 2 million, of which 49% is children. The biggest challenge that my country is facing currently is poverty, which is making it even difficult for us to respond to the children's needs. So when it comes to the instruments that we have adopted, when it comes to child protection, I will quickly talk about the convention, the Hague Convention on Inter-Country Adoption. Some of the children are in need of care and protection, and sometimes having to find an alternative home for them is very important. So if we fail to place them here at home, we have to place them outside other countries. And then Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability, we have ratified that one in 2008. Among the people with disabilities, we have children, and they also have rights that needs to be respected. So we have ratified the convention. Fortunately, it has led us to the right path because we have been able to develop a policy on disability, and right now we are working on the Act and Disability Equity Bill, and very soon we will realize the rights of people with disability in our country. We also ratified the Convention on the Minimum Age of Employment in 1973, that in 1973. Child labor is one of those very big issues that are making countries uncomfortable. However, we have the Principal Act, the Children's Protection and Welfare Act, which is somehow not harmonized with the convention, but we are working on that. Coming to our domestic laws now, I will talk about the Children's Protection and Welfare Act. That is our principal act when it comes to children's protection. It is the Act of 2011. The Act responds to a number of child protection issues that includes children's rights, property grabbing, which is one of the most common violations of rights against children, alternative care, it is covered there. Children in conflict and in contact with the law, we have other methods of doing justice with children instead of putting them in the institutions. We have diversions and other methods. The law also addresses the issue of trafficking and abduction of children. Other than that, when it comes to the issue of education, we have the Education Act. Earlier, it was mentioned that our Education Act provides for free and compulsory education. That is very true at primary level. So when it comes to high school level, our Ministry of Social Development has the bursary department that awards students with bursaries so that they can further their education at high school and secondary level. However, we don't have much to say on education at the level of ECCD because parents still have to pay. We only have the center-based model whereby parents have to pay for the education. The Sexual Offences Act of 2003 also still provides for the protection of children because there's a section that talks about sexual offenses of children. However, it still contradicts with our principal act in that the age of consent is at 16, while the principal act says a child is someone below the age of 18, and that someone who is below the age of 18 cannot consent to sex. Our Constitution of Lesotho of 1993 protects for everyone. Therefore, it's one of the instruments that we have, and the legislative instruments that we have in Lesotho. The policies that we have to protect our children and to make sure that they have access and their rights are realized, they include the integrated education the integrated education childhood care and protection policy, which the strategy 5 of that talks about access to social grants and access to other welfare services is directly responsible to my ministry. The National Disability and Rehabilitation Policy also, we developed that in 2011 to respond to the needs of children with disability and other people with disability. The National AIDS and HIV/AIDS policy of 2006 also provides for the access to treatment and other services that may be related to HIV that will enhance the lives of children. Our part here is to mitigate the effects of HIV as the Minister of Social Development. Our OVC policy, Orphan and Vulnerable Children policy of 2006 is now outdated. We are in the process of developing a new policy, the child protection policy. Hopefully it will be completed in 2021, the first quarter of 2021. Coming to the guidelines that we have when we do our child protection, we have the elimination of child labor guidelines for agricultural sector of 2014. Attention is paid on the headers. We are a country that still believes in livestock. Unfortunately, children are taken out of school, especially the boy child. They are the ones who do the heading of the cattle. So the guidelines provides for their protection. We have the National Foster Care and Adoption Guidelines, whereby we are guided as to how to go about the alternative care. That policy, that guidelines is for 2013. In our different ministries now, from the Ministry of Police, the success that I can talk about is the establishment of anti-trafficking trafficking in persons unit within the police. Trafficking in persons is one of those huge crimes that needs to be taken care of by the appropriate authorities. So the police now have that unit in them. Our bidding for the hosting of the Secretariat of the African Community on the rights of and welfare of children, which we won in 2019, to us as a country is a huge success that we are still so happy with. And hopefully when the relocation has started, yes, it has started, when everybody is here, we are looking forward to working with them harmoniously. And their being here does not necessarily actually is going to work into our favor, that they will help us and help us to implement and in many aspects, yes, of child protection. Our ministry also was once a department under Ministry of Health, but our success of making it a ministry in 2014 of social development, it enabled us now to be an independent ministry, whereby we are saying we are able to carry out our mandate of care and protection of vulnerable groups, children included. We have a budget that is now responsible under the ministry. Unlike when we were under a huge ministry like that one of health, a little bit was coming to us and much of the budget was spent on other issues. To us, that is a success. We also have a setting up of adolescent health corners countrywide in the government hospitals, where we are saying our adolescents have the privacy of talking about their health-related issues without with the people that are trained to help them, without a shame or anything that will make them unable to communicate their issues. But we are very much aware that the issue of traveling long distances to get to the district hospitals is experienced by many children. However, the health centers.
Thank you, Madam. You should be coming to a close now, please, of your report. You have just a minute or two left. Thank you.
Oh, this is the end of the time allocated. Can I conclude with the violence against children survey that we have just launched?
Yes, go on quickly, please.
Okay. My country has just launched the Violence Against Children survey that was conducted in 2018. We have the response plan. The beauty of the survey is that it has informed us about the prevalence of violence committed against children. And through that survey, we were able to now have priorities as to where are we going after the launch of the violence. Among the priorities that have been identified by the survey is the issue of food insecurity. Now we know that other than being sexual or physical or emotional abuse, children are also experiencing food insecurity. And we also learned that our girls among the population that were interviewed are the ones who suffered violence a lot. So our interventions now are informed when it comes to child protection. We have a plan of action in place that we are sharing with our partners, because child protection is a multi-sectoral issue, and we are implementing the action plan the moment it has been costed and made available to the partners. But let me conclude by informing you about the ending child marriage campaigns that we have in the country, that they have turned out to be a huge success to us. After the campaigns have taken place, we have been informed
Thank you. Can you make that very brief, please? We need to conclude.
I would like to say that the campaigns have informed our people that child marriage is a criminal offense. Therefore, there's a decline in children who are getting married. Thank you very much.
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much, Madam, for that very enlightening report on how far Lesotho has performed. At this time, we'll call on representatives of government of Malawi to give us a briefing on the progress of the implementation of the Charter. Malawi is represented by two people, Justin Trevor Hamela, who is the Child Protection and Gender Specialist in the Ministry of Gender and Children, as well as Mr. Kondwani Mhoni, who is the District Gender Officer in the same Ministry of Children and Disability. You have 10 minutes, please. Let us observe the time. You're welcome. Representatives of Malawi.
All right, thank you so much, Chairperson. My name is your right report. Yes, can you hear me? Yes, thank you so much, Chairperson, for recognizing me.
Just remember that you have 10 minutes, please.
All right, we'll try as much as possible to present within 10 minutes. Yeah, I'm Justin Hamera. I'm actually the Deputy Director for Child Affairs in the ministry responsible for children. As Malawi, we are a party to the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, and we ratified it in 1999, and also managed to submit our initial report. Following the ratification, we made a number of strides in terms of domesticating the Charter and the other instruments that relates to issues of children. We adopted the 2020 agenda and also its aspirations within our legislative frameworks, plans, and programs, which, if I have time, I'll be able to share some of the issues that we have done. But also, we have a number of key milestones, which I would also share in terms of the legal framework, the policies, programs, and also the coordination arrangements that we have as a country. But first, to share our status with regards to the rights of children in Malawi. Just like I've already mentioned, that we have domesticated a number of regional provisions. In our constitution, we have a Bill of Rights, which I think have included more issues or provided by the Charter into the Constitution. And also, from 2006 to 2015, Malawi has reviewed a number of its child-related laws, whereby the intention was to domesticate the regional provisions into our pieces of legislation. I will come back later on when I will specifically provide the statutes that we have as a country, which are more or less like giving more specific issues under the child rights. But also in terms of the programs that we have as a country. So in general, I would be saying that the rights of children have been translated into various programs as well as projects, some of which I can mention, like the Children's Corner is one of the popular programs that we are implementing in almost each and every traditional authority level, which is a community level. But we also have the child-led clubs and the Early Child Development Program, which is being implemented countrywide. And the Early Child Development Program has basically around 12,000 ECD centers, more or less like to provide early start for the children, because this is also another key important aspect in terms of promoting children's rights. In terms of the commemoration, I would be saying that indeed Malawi has been commemorating the or also promoting the provisions of the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. I think in different kind of commemorations. For example, every year Malawi commemorates the Day of African Child, which falls on the 16th of June. And during this particular time, we usually invite different duty bearers and the children themselves to express themselves in terms of what they want to demand from the duty bearers. And we target not less than 5,000 or even more than 5,000 children, because we commemorate at national level as well as in all the related districts where they have specific kind of activities. But also linked to the same is the International Day for the Girl Child, where we give specific problems, attention to the problems that the girl child face here in Malawi. And the key issue in Malawi for the past 5 years is the issues of child marriages. And also on the 20th November, we do commemorate the World Children's Day. And we also put more emphasis on what children would need, and more or less like provide the platform for them on issues that affect them. In a nutshell, I would be saying that we had a very good regional commemoration event, which we had hosted, where I think the ASWEC was invited to Malawi, and so many important issues were shared, and the children had an opportunity to interface with the policy makers. This year, as we're commemorating the World Children's Day, children had an opportunity to interact with the head of state. So around 60 children had an interactive dialogue with the state president, where they have actually agreed that a small task force of children, composed of children, should be, interacting with His Excellency the President, and share their inner issues and even proposals on issues related to the children. In terms of the status of our state party reporting, like I've already mentioned, we submitted our report in 2014, and the initial report was reviewed in 2018, and we are in the process of finalizing our periodic report, which we should be able to finish by the end of this year. In regard to assessment and of the implementation of the report, like I've already mentioned, we submitted our initial report, and we received concluding observations, which we reviewed in terms of putting action plans to say every recommendation, we should come up with activities, how to respond to it. And we also shared this to all stakeholders so that everyone should take a reading law or implement the recommendations. Regarding the domestication, I think I've already mentioned that we have a number of important acts of Parliament, which include the Child Care Protection Justice Act. This has included issues of care for children, because we have the problems of parental support. Issues of child maintenance is a problem. So this law is addressing that. The issues of protection, issues of abuse, violence, etc., is addressed in this particular act, as well as justice. We've included the issues of child justice in this particular law. Trafficking in persons is a problem. We have that law. The problem of Marriage and Divorce and Family Relations Act is an issue. Like I've already mentioned, that Malawi has around 42% of child marriage issues, but we have specific kind of provisions that are trying to address that particular problem. If I have space and time, I will be able to share more issues regarding that, because we have made a number of progress related to the same. We have a National Children's Policy, which is also implementing the Charter. So going back to the milestones that I've already mentioned, I think in a nutshell, I would be saying that Malawi has that good political will in terms of issues of children, and we have very vibrant programs that are being implemented supporting that same political will. We have a special ministry that is responsible for children, which is the ministry that I represent, and we have a Department of Child Affairs that looks at all issues of children, including coordination. But again, last year, our Parliament enacted an act of Parliament to establish a National Commission for Children, which is basically aimed at providing coordination, but also ensure accountability of all partners that are handling issues of children. Her Excellency, the First Lady, is the ambassador of issues of child marriages, but also Malawi is committed to accelerate the promotion of children's rights. I'll come back to that because I have a special slide that talks about the pledges Malawi made to the children of Malawi. And I'll also be failing my duties if I don't mention that in 2017, Malawi amended its constitution to accommodate the definition as provided by the Charter, a thing that Malawi sets an example for within the whole region, and we have good practices related to that. In terms of the laws, I think I'll not dwell much on that because I've already highlighted that we have a very good progressive laws in the country, which I think are helping to protect the children. In terms of the programs, we have very good programs. One is the early child development, which is targeting at reaching 70% of all the children. We also want to increase the number of child protection workers who are our frontline workers in addressing issues of abuse targeting the children. We are also trying to professionalize social workforce, meaning that all social workers, they need to work as professionals. So they need to be registered so that we know the ratio of social service to the children. I think that's another area that we are promoting. We are attempting to reduce the episodes of child marriages by 20% because child marriage is a problem, like I've already mentioned. Due to COVID, Malawi made a rapid assessment where it established that around 13,000 girls have been married within the period of from March to August. We have discovered that 13 marriages have occurred. And at the same time, around 45,000 girls have been made pregnant. So we have come up with a special program to ensure that all those marriages are annulled and the girls are taken back to school. In terms of promotion of children's rights and the pledges that the government has made to the children, I want to share with you, Chair, that Malawi has pledged to the children that it will continue its political will and ensure that we're able to enforce all the laws and also address the gaps in the existing laws. Secondly, we've committed to the children of Malawi that we're going to increase budget allocation for children's services, particularly at council level, so that all services are accessed. I think that's a commitment that we are looking forward, and we have developed what we call minimum service package for children's services. Possibly most of the countries within the region may also learn from us. The third one, we are promoting child participation through Children's Parliament, and we are currently developing guidelines on child participation, which would want countries like Kenya and Uganda to share with us their experiences, so much so that as we launch it, it should be consistent to the provisions, but also what is being practically done. And His Excellency the President has directed that we should roll out all child participation initiatives in all the corners of the country. Issues of birth registration is a priority, and we are working on that. And also we have
Dr. Hamela.
Yes, I'm trying.
Dr. Hamela, your time is up. Can you just give a concluding comment now?
Yes,
Can you just give a concluding comment because your time is up? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I was about to finalize that we have established what we call a National Commission for Children, and we are trying to operationalize it so that all partners working on issues of children are held accountable. In terms of the challenges, I think this is the usual, that the coordination and transparency among its partners is always a problem. Issues of data management still remains a challenge. But with the National Commission, I've already highlighted, and the coordination arrangement that we have within the country, we hope all these issues will be addressed. So basically, I think that's what I wanted to share as a country in terms of our implementation of the Charter. Thank you so much, Chair, and over.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hamela, for that very enlightening presentation on the robust steps that have been taken by your country. We have now received confirmations from Mozambique and we'll be calling on the representative of Government of South Africa, who is Dr. Rose September, who is the Director in the Ministry of Social Development. Madam, you are welcome. Please remember you have 10 minutes for your briefing. Thank you very much.
Good morning, colleagues, and what a privilege it is to join our continent today in commemorating our 30th anniversary on the rights and welfare of the child, we want to start off by saluting all the child rights activists in our country and our continent particularly, that continue to do wonderful, marvelous work on behalf of all our children and to make Africa a continent fit for its children. So we salute your colleagues this morning. South Africa have joined the continent in terms of that celebration. And we have implemented a number of platforms to do so this year. This particular commemoration comes at the time that we are all deeply steeped in the COVID pandemic, that the world, and of course that in particular our own continent bears the brunt of. We are very aware, colleagues, that fiscal constrictions and budget adjustments often put children particularly at risk. And so we are aware that budgets will further constrict. And this, of course, poses our primary threat and thus the primary focus of child poverty on our continent. We know millions of our children on our continent still live below the poverty line. And as a continent, we must spare no effort to collaborate and to develop a joint agenda to fight child poverty going forward. South Africa itself remains resolved in its commitment to work towards that Africa that's fit for its children. We recognize as our government that the AU Secretariat on the Rights and Welfare of the Child will move to Lesotho. And as our new neighbor, we would like to support them and offer the support going forward. Allow me now, colleagues, to provide an overview on the progress that South Africa has made since its ratification of the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. South Africa has institutionalized child rights governance, and we do that by ensuring that we develop a national plan of action for children at the beginning of every midterm strategic framework term for every single administration. That means after every election, we must have a new national plan of action for children. That national plan of action then forms the basis on which government departments provides the targets for that 5-year cycle. What is the objectives and the targets that that specific government department must achieve? It is also institutionalized in government's monitoring and regulatory framework to ensure accountability and feedback in terms of progress made on behalf of children. In our National Plan of Action for Children, which was approved by our cabinet this year, we've emphasized the importance of early childhood development. And when we speak about early childhood development, we speak about it in the sense of no child must be left behind. An opportunity for each child to access early childhood development, including early access to health, nutrition, mental health detection, disability detection early in the life course of that child. Childcare and protection remains a cornerstone of our country, and particularly we are ashamed of the continued high levels of violence and exploitation of our children. As the world and particularly our continent knows, we have an extensive social security system where 12.8 million of our children receive the child support grant. During COVID, we have ended social protection to families and young people who are not on a social support grant and who may have lost their jobs and who are unemployed. In line with the pillars of the Charter, our Constitution, our National Development Plan, our National Plan of Action for Children are built around three particular programs. The first one is to strengthen child rights governance across all parts of government. That means strong national coordinating mechanism, which is called the Office on the Rights of the Child. Currently, it's based at the Department of Social Development. And then we have its counterparts in provinces as well as municipalities. A strong pillar of the institutional and governance pillar is our quest and our continued commitment to build the sector's capacity. And for that, we've just recently partnered with the National School of Government to ensure that we have an online training program for all stakeholders. We also, according to the President's emphasis on district development model, we are mainstreaming and ensuring that the children's governance program are mainstreamed within our municipalities using our child-friendly framework. Our second program and pillar is heightened advocacy and awareness on children's rights and social mobilization. And this finds its way in terms of our national advocacy strategy that will be in place next year. And that specific program focuses on International Children's Day, the Day of the African Child, and in particular, it coincides with strengthening children's participation from local government up to provincial and then our national annual children's parliament. And then lastly, and importantly, the third pillar of our National Plan of Action for Children focuses on monitoring, evaluation, and reporting on child rights governance. This is in particular geared towards strengthening oversight for all stakeholders that have duties pertaining to children. So how do we do that? We have institutionalized and regularized our governmental frameworks for departments to report to parliamentary committees, and we need to strengthen that. It's not where we want it to be, but we need to strengthen it. We also do that, and we will produce next year our annual status report, report on children to Cabinet, and then of course to Parliament. And then we have complied in terms of reporting to the AU in our cyclical periodic reports. We also report and have complied in terms of our international reporting to the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Colleagues, allow me to conclude with the quotation from the 6th report of the Innocenti Center of UNICEF. And just before I conclude, I think once again, colleagues, if I want to emphasize the issue of collaboration across the continent on a couple of issues. The first one is the promotion of non-discrimination and equality amongst children and amongst nation states. Secondly, collaboration on the protection of children in situations of increased vulnerability. Thirdly, the matter, and I think a colleague or two have already raised the issue of the importance of data collection and building strong data collection systems, and of course, partnering in terms of sharing best practices in this regard. In that particular context, it's extremely important to note that whilst we're going into deepening child poverty in the continent, we must consider child rights impact assessment studies. How do we know and how do we ensure that austerity measures that government employs actually have positive results and outcomes for children? I think it's a worthy program to consider in terms of collaboration. So I want to conclude by the quote of UNICEF by saying the following: protecting children from the sharpest edges of poverty during their years of growth and formation is both the mark of a civilized society, and it is a means of addressing some of the evident problems that affect not only the quality of their own lives, but the quality of the lives of all our countries and nation states, and particularly the quality of Africa that we want to see for all who lives in it. Thank you, ma'am. I conclude.
Madam Chair, you are on mute. You are on mute.
Yes, you are right, Ayalu. Thank you very much for that presentation that has opened up to us steps that have been taken by the government of South Africa, as well as the recommendations. And on that note, we will now receive the report, the briefing from the government of Zambia. Government of Zambia is represented by Ms. Bridget Moya, who is the Director, Child Development, Ministry of Youth, Sports, and Child Development of Zambia. Madam, you are welcome to the podium. You have 10 minutes, please. So you try to summarize. Thank you.
Hello?
Yeah.
Good afternoon to you, everyone. I choose to ride on the earlier protocols that were given in this workshop, and I bring greetings from Zambia. I would like to start with an update on the COVID situation in the country. I would like to report that it is declining. And as you, many of us are aware that schools were actually affected. Because they are doing exams. And the background to Zambia is that we are implementing the commitments that we made since we signed the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child in 1992, and we ratified it in 2008. Zambia has a child policy, which is anchored in the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Child Development. And the objective of the policy is to coordinate and manage the formulation and implementation of a multi-sectoral child welfare and development program in order to ensure that children are able to reach their full potential. Under the same policy, we also have as an objective to enforce child protection rights, to safeguard and uphold. So I have as an objective to fund national development. I wish to share that the government has ratified, among other conventions, the Conventions on the Rights of Persons with Disability ratified in 2010, and the protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on further, the government we have had a 2016, which gives the definition of the Education Act, which provides for early childhood education and secondary education. We have the Anti-Gender Act of 2008. The ratification and signing of international convention and subsequent provision shows government's determination to ensure that children's rights are upheld, are protected, and respected. One of the underpinning principles is child participation, and as government, this has been taken on board, and we've seen the formation of children's rights councils in schools and student councils in secondary schools. We've also had activities around child parliament, and the climax was in 2017 when the Children's Parliament debated on the 2017 national budget and issued a communique which saw a change or an adjustment in the budget for that year from 9% to 12% at the time. Further to this, because now we have rolled out into schools, school councils, child's rights committees, and we've also succeeded in raising awareness in 6 out of the 10 provinces in the country. Under the principle of child protection and welfare, I also wish to share that in 2014, Zambia undertook the first national survey on violence against children. And the objective was to measure the prevalence and nature and consequences of sexual, physical, and emotional violence on children. And also to enhance the country's capacity to design, implement, and evaluate violence prevention and response programs, and also to build capacities successful child protection system. I wish to share that the reports and they showed that there was quite a prevalent number of children that were still being affected emotionally, physically, and they were being sexually abused by the very people that were supposed to give them protection. So to that effect, Zambia launched a plan to firstly enter into the Global Partnership for Ending Violence Against Children, which I am happy to share with you that on the 19th of November, 2020, Zambia was accepted and welcomed into the Global Partnership. Further to the launch on violence against children, Zambia has developed the National Prevention and Response Plan on Ending Violence Against Children. It's on the provisions of the plan. And this was developed, validated, and adopted through a multi-sectoral National Coordinating Committee for Children. And in the same vein, Zambia has developed a national discussion paper on the campaign to end violence against children. This is expected to inform nationwide campaign and will bring stakeholders on board to end violence against children. Government has re-established the National Coordinating Committee for Children, which is a national structure that facilitates coordination and management of all child's rights programs in the country. Under child justice, the government has been revamping the National Child Justice Forum since the 2018. The mandate of the forum is to facilitate the coordination and collaboration among government, quasi-government, and sector. And this has seen a revived coordination and child-related justice instruments. The relevant child justice institutions have adopted child-friendly procedures, and in that regard have specialized focal persons to handle children's matters to secure the protection of child at every stage. On ending child marriage, I wish to share that Zambia has formulated the national strategy on end child marriage. The national strategy is aimed at accelerating national efforts to end child marriage by 2030, and it has provided an operational framework.
Hello? Hello, Madam Bridget. I'm sorry, but you have just 2 minutes left. And so you should be winding down the briefing. Thank you.
Can I just end with the opportunities that Zambia have and challenges?
Yes, please.
Briefly, please.
The challenges that Zambia has, in the past, we've had quite weak coordination mechanism. And as a result, coordination of child rights program was scanty. And we didn't have adequate capacities among officials in managing child's rights programs. And then there are weak structures of tracking the issuance of recommendations, lack of a systematic capture of information. And the opportunities we have is that under the National Development Plan, Zambia advocates for a multi-sectoral approach and has clustered different departments in one group. And this, we believe, will give us an opportunity to effectively coordinate child's rights program. And going forward, we are looking at building capacities in and among officials and
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Bridget, for that presentation and enlightenment on what the government of Zambia has done so far. And now we are going to call on the last presentation, the last briefing, which will be from the government of Zimbabwe. And to represent Zimbabwe, we have Dr. Jay Mangwiro, who is the Deputy Minister in the Ministry of Health and Child Care. Welcome, Your Excellency. You have 10 minutes, please, to brief the committee on the progress you have made. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Zimbabwe would like to acknowledge and appreciate the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Children inviting member states to join the commemoration of the 30th anniversary of the Charter by way of reflecting on implementation progress. Children are critical for any country's sustained socio-economic development as a future resource. Zimbabwe is working towards protecting its children to fulfill children's rights by supporting the rights governance systems to effectively monitor and implement children's rights as enshrined in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Children and the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Children, of the child, while ensuring children's participation across the spectrum. The report will highlight the general situation of child rights in the country following the action points from the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Children and emerging challenges for children in the country. The general rights of children in Zimbabwe. The situation of children in Zimbabwe chronicles a story of progress, challenges, decline, and recovery for children. Of the 13 million people in Zimbabwe, 48% are children. Most of them, about 72% or 4.5 million, live in rural areas. More than a quarter of the children below the age of 18 are not living with their parent. is confirmed by the MICS 2017 figure of 26.6%. Zimbabwe is progressively guaranteeing the rights of children in areas such as access to healthcare, education, food and water. Zimbabwe has over 20 comprehensive laws protecting children from violence, sexual and economic exploitation. Celebrations, ACERWC action points. 1, celebrations in a participatory manner. Zimbabwe is in participation with civil organizations. We commemorate the 30th anniversary on November 2020. Ratification of the Charter. The Republic of Zimbabwe ratified the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Children in 1995. Reservations on provisions of the Charter. The Republic of Zimbabwe ratified the Charter with no reservations. Status of state party report submission. Zimbabwe submitted its initial report in 2014, which was considered by the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Children in 2015. My government takes cognizance of the delay in the submission of the first periodic report. However, the report is to be presented before Cabinet this month. Assessment of the implementation of the Charter. Zimbabwe hosted the African Committee of Experts on Rights and Welfare of the Child to assess the implementation of the Charter in 2019. The mission was invited to join commemorations of the Day of the African Child during the visit. The implementation of the Charter is supported by a comprehensive implementation plan of action, which is a monitoring framework. This will strengthen the implementation strategy of the country. Legislative harmony of policies and laws in the country. Government is working on a number of legislation in order to enhance the protection and promotion of the rights of the child. These include, among others, the Education Amendment of 2020. The Education Amendment of Act of 2020 guarantees children's fundamental rights. It stipulates that no people should be sent away because of non-payment of fees and pregnancy. Through the Act, corporal punishment has been abolished in all schools, in all school settings. Children's Amendment Bill. The Children's Amendment Bill is intended to harmonize the definition of a child to mean any person under the age of 18 years, in alignment with the Constitution of Zimbabwe, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, and the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. Amendments of Guardianship or Minor Act, Chapter 5-8. Government of Zimbabwe is in the process of amending the Act to amplify the principle of the best interests of the child by conferring equal rights to both parents concerning custody and guardianship. The marriage bills. The bill seeks to, among others, ban pledging of children in marriages, hence prohibiting child marriages. Set minimum age of all marriages at 18 in conformity with the Constitution and protect children from sexual exploitation. This bill has passed through its third reading in Parliament and is now before the Senate. Child Justice Bill. Government seeks to address the treatment of children in conflict and in conduct and conflict with the law through the Child Justice Bill. The bill seeks to separate welfare and children protection issues from child criminal justice matters and is now at an advanced stage. The enactment will help the country to create a juvenile justice system which takes into account children's rights and welfare when they are in conduct and conflict with the law. It aims at setting the minimum age of criminal responsibility at up 12 years. Cyber Bill. The purpose of the bill is to consolidate cyber-related offenses and provide for data protection with due regard to the Declaration of Rights and the Constitution and the public and national interest. This will result in the criminalization of child pornography and online sex offenses. Child's rights policy. The child rights policy offers effective comparative advantage in child rights implementation, coordination, monitoring, and reporting at state party level. The policy intended to empower the Child Care Department to coordinate, monitor, and report on the child rights activities, implementation and domestication of international and regional recommendations and observations. Implementation, number 7, implementation of recommendations and decisions of the ACERW. Child care is responsible for the coordination of the ministries and stakeholders for the implementation, monitoring, and reporting of all the recommendations and decisions made into the country. Corporal punishment as disciplinary action. Disciplinary action against learners must respect the child's human dignity and the best interest of the child. Section 16 of the Education Act requires every school to have a disciplinary policy. It does not permit any treatment that doesn't respect the dignity of the child. Any discipline which amounts to physical or psychological torture or to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment is outlawed. The best interests of the child are placed at the center of any disciplinary measure. Learners with disability. The Education Act provides for the rights of people with any disability. Access to sexual and reproductive health services. Section 4 of the amended Education Act declares that the state must ensure the provision of sanitary ware and the menstrual health facilities. These include water and sanitation in all schools. The amendment provides for the appointment of sexual reproductive health personnel at every school. Furthermore, government has established in its institution youth-friendly services. Access to birth registration. Zimbabwe is one of the best birth and death registry system in Africa. The process is decentralized to all the 67 districts, and an additional 210 substations are in place in the country. Every hospital and health facility in the country issues a birth record for every child born in a health facility. The registrar's office has extended services by establishing offices at health facilities to increase accessibility for birth registration. Resource allocation for child rights. Government has allocated resources for child rights activities in areas of health, child protection, education.
Your Excellency, I regret to say that we are running out of time. And so could you round off in a minute, please? Yeah, we are really out of time now.
Your Excellency, you're on mute.
Under harmonized social cash transfer, public assistance, and food deficit mitigation program, drought management program, assistance is provided to labor-constrained, food poor, vulnerable households per month to enable them to sustain their day-to-day living. The public fund vulnerable households are given basic commodities as a token for their labor at public recognized institutions. Vulnerable groups are provided with health assistance under the assisted medical treatment orders at public hospitals. Under the Basic Education Assistance Module, BEAM, tuition fees levy and examination fee assistance is provided to vulnerable children. Action plans for thematic child rights. Government has developed and implemented, among others, the following: A, National Implementation Plan for Child Rights, National Plan of Action for OVC. 3, Child Survival Strategy, National Nutritional Strategy, Reproductive Maternal Neonatal Child Strategy. Mechanisms to ensure child participation in matters affecting their interests. Government has developed the following strategies: Junior Parliament, Junior Urban Council, Junior Rural Councils. 11, collaborate with all stakeholders, including UN agencies, SCOM, and media. In promoting children's rights, the state's regional obligations is working in partnership with the non-governmental organizations and youth groups, UN agencies, faith-based organizations, civil society organizations, business, private sector, and the traditional systems of governance. The complementary All efforts include financial support towards children's rights program. Contemporary and emerging challenges. Zimbabwe children and their families have been facing challenges due to occurrences of multiple humanitarian crises that include cyclones, drought, and the COVID-19 pandemic. However, despite all that, there has been a reduction in under 5 mortality and infant mortality over the past 5 years in Zimbabwe. Findings from the multiple indicator cluster survey revealed that 5 mortality rate dropped from 75 deaths per 1,000 live births in 2014 to 65 deaths per 1,000 live births in 2019. Infant mortality rate dropped from 55 deaths per 1,000 live births to 47 deaths per 1,000 live births the same period. Maternal mortality ratio declined by 33% between 2014 and 2019, from 614 in 2014 to 462 deaths per 100,000 live births. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And on that note, I wish to thank all the presenters for their briefings, their country briefs to the committee on the status of implementation and progress in the implementation of the Charter. Some key things were very obvious that for most of the countries have submitted their first reports, but that there are outstanding periodic reports waiting to be met. Also that the domestication of the Charter has been domesticated by many countries into their national laws. And the reports also show how the COVID-19 threw up the need for countries to have contingency plans to deal with children in the time of emergencies. I did not quite clearly hear any comments on what has been done with the AU guiding note on mainstreaming the rights of children in COVID-19 interventions and by extension other emergencies. But on that note, we have come to the end, and I want to thank you all for your very rich briefs. We do not really have questions in the Q&A, meaning that there are no questions, except if the committee members want to make a comment or two with the permission of the chairman, maybe for 10 minutes. If there are any comments, we'll comment on them, we will make them, and then we'll proceed on the health break. Thank you.
Can I make a comment, Your Excellency?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. This is Mushira Khattab from Egypt. I would like to thank the distinguished representatives of states who took the floor and gave us this valuable brief. I actually want to draw the attention of the distinguished delegates to the global study on children deprived of their liberty. And I will be asking the delegates and any other representatives of states or partners to pay attention to this global study on children deprived of their liberty. And I hope that they will consistently report to the committee on what the states have done to implement the recommendations of this study. Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope that we register this in the minutes and we may elaborate on it later on with member states and within our meetings as members of the committee. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you very much, Madam Khattab. I was just going to ask you to show us your video, and now we have seen you. Do we have any more comments? Okay, it looks like we don't have any comments and we don't have any more questions apart
Sorry, Chair. Hello.
from the
Can you hear
useful
me?
inputs by
Madam Chair, you're on mute. You're on mute. Madam Chair, you're on mute again. You're on mute. I think Honorable Mashamba wants to speak.
Yes, I do want to speak, yes. Hello, Chair.
Pouvez y aller, Honorable Mashamba.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would also want to commend the speaker. I have a question to Madam
Honorable Mashamba. Honorable Mashamba, I think you have two devices on and there is an echo. So if you can turn off one of the devices.
Yes, I have turned it.
Yes.
I have a question directly to the delegation from Botswana, Madam Okame. The issue concerning the reservation that was entered by Botswana in respect of Article 2 of the Charter regarding the definition of the child. I understand that Botswana has legislated on children's rights and there is a children's bill of rights, but still the reservation is still there. When is the government of Botswana considering to remove, to withdraw that reservation? Thank you, Chair.
May I?
Yes, go ahead. Yes, go ahead, Madam.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mashaba. As I had indicated in my report that efforts are already underway. We have reviewed several pieces of our legislation, and we continue to do that. And even the process for lifting the reservation has commenced. So we are hoping to have that as soon as before the end of the coming year. Work has already commenced in terms of lifting the reservation, because there are no longer any legal impediments to that. Thank you.
Okay,
Madam
thank you.
Chair, can I make a very brief comment on the presentation by the Honorable Representative of Lesotho?
Okay, go on, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. As a new member of this distinguished committee, forgive me if my comment will be out of the ordinary. I listened with great interest to all the presentations and enjoyed it, and they were very, very informative. I would like to commend in particular the distinguished representative of Lesotho in dealing with the gaps and the challenges, because it's not very often that we hear about the gaps. We always hear about the achievements, but it's our duty as members of the committee to assist member states in dealing with the gaps. Thank you, Madam. So I hope that this will give the representative of Lesotho will guide further future input by distinguished members of states, representatives of states, as well as partners and members of the civil society. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much for that observation and your comment. I think I could say the same for the government of Zambia, who pointed out some of their weaknesses in the areas of weak coordination and inadequate capacity of role players and lack of systematic capture of information. And I think we don't have any more comments. So on that note, we have come to the end of this segment. And I want to thank Mr. Chair profusely for the opportunity given me to facilitate this segment. I'll hand back to him. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Bonjour.
Oh, okay. Honorable Abubakar has a very quick.
Ok. C'est par rapport à la coordination. Il est très important.
I'm talking about coordination. It is very important for countries of the Southern African region to enjoy the best practices of other countries. Zimbabwe has presented a very good report, and it will be necessary for countries for the Southern African region to have a mechanism for coordination between the countries. Thank you, Madam Coordinator. Moderator, sorry.
Thank you very much, Honorable, for that very wonderful comment. And on this note, I hand over back to the Honorable Chairperson of the committee. Thank you very much, sir.
Merci beaucoup, Honorable Aver, pour le travail.
Thank you, Honorable Aver, for a wonderful job done. We would like to sincerely thank the honorable delegates or members of the states of Angola, Botswana, Lesotho, Malawi, South Africa, Zambia, Zimbabwe. Now we will have a short break. Let us have a break of 13 minutes. 13 minutes break. We are now 2:22 at this time, and we will come back at 2:35. That is in 13 minutes. And at that time, Honorable Masamba will chair the meeting. Thank you. 13 minutes break.
Children's rights are basic human rights, but with particular interest to the child. So there are the rights which are linked directly to the child. Like the child has a right to live in a safe environment, an environment which is conducive enough for them to excel and things like that. So they are human rights, but in particular interest looking at the child.
Le Comité africain d'experts sur les droits et le bien-être de l'enfant a été mis en place en vertu de l'article 32 de la Charte africaine sur les droits et le bien-être de l'enfant pour faire le suivi de la mise en œuvre de la Charte par les États partis. Et dans le cadre de notre travail, nous analysons les rapports des différents États partis, mais également après l'analyse de ces rapports, nous émettons des recommandations Et après un certain temps, nous menons des missions de suivi et évaluation pour voir quel état de mise en œuvre de nos recommandations.
I believe that as every year passes, the capacity of states to protect and promote the rights of the child is getting better. We say that a child born today is most probably better than a child born yesterday or last year, and definitely much better than a child that was born 30 years ago, when the Convention on the Rights of the Child was adopted and when the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child was adopted.
This year we celebrated the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and next year we celebrate the commemoration of the African Charter at 30 years. In terms of milestones, the African child has become more visible in that their rights are better protected, and also through the work of the committees, especially let me speak about the African Committee, there has been so much outreach through the work of the committee, and also at the state parties level, there are so many programs that have been introduced to enhance the protection and promotion of children's rights.
Safeguarding the rights and welfare of the African child is something that we, as a committee members, we care about, and we have seen that a lot have been conducted so far since those two instruments were ratified, and almost most of the countries ratified them. A lot have been conducted, as I mentioned, and the children now are right bearers, and they know their rights, they can participate and they can be heard, they have the opportunity to dream for a better future.
I believe the African leaders signed up to the Charter to reinforce their commitment to the implementation and the guaranteeing protection, promotion of the fundamental freedoms and the rights of every child on the African continent.
The committee, they have been working tirelessly with other organizations and partners in order to improve the life of children in Africa. So the change that we want to see is to improve the education system in Africa, the protection system, because here I can say I am protected, I'm feeling at least home.
The existing frameworks actually provide us with an excellent opportunity for doing more. The challenge remains their consistent implementation in situations of conflict and also in other developmental contexts. My sense is that one of the things that we will need on the continent is to consistently come together under a common framework that helps us, that is based on our core commitments for children.
The Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. So what we want is nothing for us without us. We want to participate. Right now there are children living in conflict regions like the DRC. I'm not from the DRC, but I may have solutions on what those children, how those children could be saved. I have a better understanding on what they're going through. I'm a child, so I understand what the other child is going through. So in the next 30 years, if the world embraces the inner child in the whole world, I think we'll be creating a better solution.
Children's rights are basic human rights, but with particular interest to the child. So they are the rights which are linked directly to the child. Like the child has a right to live in a safe environment, an environment which is conducive enough for them to excel and things like that. So they are human rights, but in particular interest looking at the child.
Le Comité africain d'experts sur les droits et le bien-être de l'enfant a été mis en place en vertu de l'article 32 de la Charte africaine sur les droits et le bien-être de l'enfant pour faire le suivi de la mise en œuvre de la Charte par les États parties. Et dans le cadre de notre travail, nous analysons les rapports des différents États parties, mais également, après l'analyse de ces rapports, nous émettons des recommandations et après un certain temps, nous menons des missions de suivi et évaluation pour voir quel état de mise en œuvre de nos recommandations.
I believe that as every year passes, the capacity of states to protect and promote the rights of the child is getting better. We say that a child born today is most probably better than a child born yesterday or last year, and definitely much better than a child that was born 30 years ago, when the Convention on the Rights of the Child was adopted and when the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child was adopted.
This year we celebrated the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and next year we celebrate the commemoration of the African Charter at 30 years. In terms of milestones, the African child has become more visible in that their rights are better protected, and also through the work of the committees, especially let me speak about the African Committee, there has been so much outreach through the work of the committee, and also at the state parties level, there are so many programs that have been introduced to enhance the protection and promotion of children's rights.
Safeguarding the rights and welfare of the African child is something that we, as a committee members, we care about, and we have seen that a lot have been conducted so far since those two instruments were ratified, and most of the countries ratified them. A lot have been conducted, as I mentioned, and the children now are right bearers, and they know their rights, they can participate and they can be heard. They have the opportunity to dream for a better future.
I believe the African leaders signed up to the Charter to reinforce their commitment to the implementation and the guaranteeing protection, promotion of the fundamental freedoms and the rights of every child on the African continent.
The committee, they have been working tirelessly with other organizations and partners in order to improve the life of children in Africa. So the change that we want to see is to improve the education system in Africa, the protection system, because here I can say I am protected, I'm feeling at least home.
The existing frameworks actually provide us with an excellent opportunity for doing more. The challenge remains their consistent implementation in situations of conflict and also in other developmental contexts. My sense is that one of the things that we will need on the continent is to consistently come together under a common framework that helps us, that is based on our core commitments for children.
The Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. So what we want is nothing for us without us. We want to participate. Right now there are children living in conflict regions like the DRC. I'm not from the DRC, but I may have solutions on what those children, how those children could be saved. I have a better understanding on what they're going through. I'm a child, so I understand what the other child is going through. So in the next 30 years, if the world embraces the inner child in the whole world, I think we'll be creating a better solution.
C'est maintenant le moment.
Thank you very much, Ayelo. We will now reconvene our session, and I will request Professor Benyam to take over the moderation. Benyam?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are currently based. It's a good opportunity for me to moderate this session. I understand that we have a presentation by CRINSA, the Child Rights Network in Southern Africa, and the presentation will be made by Ms. Felistas. So without taking much time, I give the floor to Ms. Felistas. Over to you.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much, Chair.
Sorry. Yeah, okay, the volume is low, but let's hear you now. Like it's coming, yeah.
Okay, let me try and increase it.
It's good now. It's good now.
Great. Thank you so much, Chairperson, and as non-state actors in the Southern Africa region, we join the world over to commemorate the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, but we also want to congratulate the committee for the attainment of 30 years of the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. A lot has been presented by the speakers that spoke before us, but our role really is just to show some of the successes and perhaps some of the gaps that as non-state actors and civil society organizations, we feel that they're in existence, and perhaps give recommendations in terms of what we think could be attained or done to address some of those gaps. I am coming from a regional network made of child service organizations in Southern African countries. We are currently operating in 11 out of 16 countries, and that means that we have over 2,000 organizations in this CRINSA as an organization. So really our role there is to make sure that we can have a Southern Africa where children's rights are respected, where they are protected, and where they are fulfilled. And because of that, we are looking into SADC as a region in terms of the demographics, the socioeconomic indicators, which can then facilitate or be a barrier in terms of the attainment of children's rights. You would know, Chairperson, that SADC is currently sitting at an estimated population of 327 million people using the 2016 data. And out of that, we understand that 45.5% are children. And by virtue of that, it means that SADC is a young population in terms of majority of its population. So that goes to show that we need, as a region, to be investing in issues of children if we are to see this region developing in relation to taking countries forward as future leaders, as children are usually referred to. Now, in terms of the Charter, SADC member states are signatories to the Charter, and Chugana's presentation earlier on as we start reflecting on the 10 aspirations of the agenda.
Sorry to interrupt. Yes. Your voice went back to the previous situation where it was so low. Maybe you have to get close to the microphone or something happened.
Okay, apologies about that.
Now I can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, great. Apologies about that. So I was saying that when we come to the charter, the most SADC member states are signatories to the charter, as has already been stated by the presentation made by Dr. Chigana this morning. When we look at Chapter 1 to Article 1 to Article 31, in terms of successes, SADC member states have laws, they have policies, and they have programs that facilitate for children's rights. They actually, in some instances, do have institutions, like we have juvenile institutions within the SADC countries that can house children that are found to be in conflict with the law. There's also provision of welfare and protection services, as was evidenced by the member states that gave a presentation before me. We also do have established children committees at national, at district, and at village level. And these committees, they've been established so that they can be the courts at those levels in terms of facilitating for the protection of children's rights. We also do have recognition of civil society organizations as key players within the children's rights sector. We are recognized by government, we are recognized by developmental partners, and in other SADC countries, we are also recognized by the private sector, who then give us support in kind and in monetary form. We have challenges here and there in terms of Tanzania, where civil society organizations sometimes are also, affected by the freedom of expression regulations or challenges, but that doesn't mean that civil society organizations in Tanzania can't work or can't provide services within the child sector. As a region, SADC has achieved a number of notable successes in education, and this is evidenced by access and equity. Is it happening again? Should I go on?
I'm not quite sure if it is only me or the others as well. If you can repeat the last sentence, please.
Oh, okay. I was saying that SADC has achieved a number of notable successes in education, and this is evidenced by access to primary education, which has high enrollment rates, and SADC countries have put in place programs that address education for orphans and vulnerable children. Am I audible, Chair?
You are, but of course the network connection, there is interruption every now and then, but continue, please.
Okay. And SADC countries also do provide health services for children free, particularly the under fives. We have SADC as a region having developed a SADC model law on child marriage. And so far, we have 2 member states who have since utilized this. We have Zambia and we have Mozambique, who have taken the SADC model law on child marriage and ensured that it's domesticated in the countries. There's also success in terms of seeking redress using the courts. We've seen strategic litigation in certain areas. To set jurisprudence, testing case is the South African case, where COVID-19 challenges had forced children that were depending on school feeding program to not have access to food, and a litigation case was brought before the courts, and it was won. We also saw an adoption case in Botswana where the laws allow that a mother, a child born out of wedlock, the mother can actually get that child adopted by the new husband, or if she's getting married without the consent of the biological father, and that biological father also won that case, setting a jurisprudence in terms of all parents having a say in the growth of their child. And then also we have a case in Zambia where it's about the effects of a mine which was closed, but it then affected children who were growing up in that region, and we saw success with that as well. We also feel that as SADC, we have had successes in terms of having representatives within the African Committee of Experts. Since the establishment of this committee, we've seen many SADC countries actually having a representative within the committee. And other successes are to do with reports and communication, and I won't go into that because Musa has already indicated that. And then lastly, in terms of successes, we are saying that we have all SADC countries that have ratified the charter, but we still have DRC that is yet to do that. In terms of the gaps, Chairperson, we have several of these, unfortunately. The first issue is that we find SADC having poor implementation of legislation across the member states. We have beautiful laws on paper in terms of national laws, but it's still very difficult to implement these laws. One of the reasons why, it's because when you look at the SADC as a region, we have different ministries responsible for certain segments of children's rights. And because of that, it's very difficult to coordinate or centralize where the children's issues are sitting and who reports to who between the government ministries and departments. And because of that, data is very difficult. That is why you see a lot of SADC member states or it's sitting in different government ministries and departments, to an extent that even those that are part of the child sector movement in terms of civil society organizations, even reporting at national level in terms of feeding into the national grid, in terms of the data, it's also very difficult. You would find that civil society organizations now are resorting to reporting to those line ministries that are actually supporting their work on the ground. So that in itself means that the implementation of legislation that we have, much as we can have it beautifully put on paper, would be difficult because of that accountability structure malfunctioning. We also do have a huge backlog of parliamentary adoption of legislation. I'm sure you heard in the morning by different government departments that there are certain policies or certain laws, reviews and enactment that are still going to go to parliament for adoption because a lot of SADC countries actually have to get the act of parliament approving or endorsing a certain law for it to be implemented. So we have a lot of those that are still lagging behind in terms of getting back to parliament for adoption. And then we also have laws that are inadequate, particularly around ensuring that they are aligned to the Children's Act, as well as the Constitution in the member states within the SADC region. Furthermore, one of the challenges we have is that of quality education and adequacy itself, because we still have areas in SADC where children do not have access to education because of the distance, in some cases because of the structures themselves, that we don't have adequate structure in terms of the infrastructure, but also structure in terms of the adequate manpower to facilitate that access to education. We also do have a backlog of birth registrations, and that in itself has led to children not accessing basic services like education and health, because it's a requirement that they should be having a national identity document, and in this case, a birth certificate. We also do have health services that are inadequate, particularly in rural areas where vaccinations of children, but also under 5s. Now we have a lot of cases of malnutrition, and it's a result of those health services being inadequate. Also, because in rural areas you would find that even the basicness requirements of living in such areas like access to water, access to electricity, so on and so forth, then means that most service providers are not willing to service people in those areas because of that. So it then means that then the services are not adequate. We also do have a lot of harmful child labor practices in the SADC region, particularly with children that are working in the farms and they don't go to school. And these farms, unfortunately, most of the time, they're even inaccessible. You can't go there because they're privately owned, and sometimes privately owned to people that are well connected, that we can't even access those farms. Children in SADC region are also sexually abused, with some of them being married off. We see a lot of pregnancies amongst children, affecting Article 16 and 27 of the Charter. There's a lot of child neglect. We have poverty as a problem in SADC, because when you look at SADC countries, there's a lot of inequality. The rich are very rich and the poor are very poor. So the equality between the poor and the rich, it's something that we really do have a problem with as a region. And because of that, issues of poverty sometimes also lead to children being abused, because parents then give consent to their children to be abused in that way. We also do have reporting as a challenge, as was evidenced by the presentation made as we started the meeting this morning, with a lot of SADC countries really not reporting to the committee. And we also do have a huge challenge in the fact that SADC, compared to other regions, perhaps in terms of regional economic blocks, we don't have a legal framework that binds member states within the SADC region on issues of children. We don't have a policy, we don't have a protocol that is a SADC protocol, a SADC policy on issues of children. And that in itself means that collectively we can't hold each other on issues of children. If we did reporting and addressing some of these challenges we indicated today would be much easier. We also do have human rights institutions that are not necessarily responding to issues of children. As you see today, compared to the three regions you've been to since Monday, we don't have anybody reporting, say I'm coming from a national human rights institution, and therefore this is my report in terms of what we are doing around issues of children. And then also issues of partnering with special rapporteurs within the committee itself, between ourselves and the committee special rapporteurs is very weak, because some of the issues that we are indicating could have been dealt with had we have that strong collaboration. As I conclude, Chairperson, looking into the recommendations, as civil society organizations or non-state actors, these are some of our recommendations. The first recommendation is that we recommend that the committee help us to make noise or even more in terms of the enactment of the SADC Child Protocol. This is the advocacy that we are currently busy with, but we would need all stakeholders from different levels really to add voice to this, that SADC needs to have a regional framework that facilitates for member states to be accountable in issues of children. And for us, we feel that the SADC Child Protocol would provide a functional regional legislative framework that would facilitate for us as a region to really coordinate ourselves better, to ensure that we can harmonize our laws at national level, but also to strengthen us as national member states to promote children's rights and well-being. So this SADC Child Protocol would enforce application of all laws that are dealing with issues around abuse and ensure that we can monitor ourselves and monitor each other effectively. It would facilitate for the effective reporting systems. Perhaps it would even improve in the way that data is fragmented at national level, such that we can have a structure that can collate data at national level so that it's much easier to get that data as and when it's needed. But we also do feel that such a protocol would improve the status of children, particularly those that are in residential areas, those that are in streets, to have better conditions in terms of their survival and development. We also recommend public education on birth registration by all stakeholders. We are all stakeholders in the children's rights, and we can all play a part to ensure that children are actually registered when they are born. Particularly when we look at Article 6 and the Agenda 2040 aspiration, we need to standardize this. We also recommend that there should be public investment in children to facilitate increment in budgetary allocations at national level, and that these budgets would facilitate for health, education, and social services to actually be improved so that they can impact children's lives positively, and that these should be in line with international and continental guidelines. We also recommend that we actually move from rhetoric to action by setting up child-friendly reporting mechanisms and child-friendly courts that would ensure that children's rights do become a reality in the SADC member states. We recommend that we have a centralized data collection and monitoring system that is strengthened, that can facilitate for the implementation of child rights laws, for the policies to be implemented, as well as programs at all levels that we have within SADC member states, but also at regional level. We recommend that we become committed as a region and as a continent to disability inclusion and ensure that issues around education, health, and social welfare and protection, they really do recognize diversities within disability and ensure that these are actually addressed. Finally, we recommend that the region finalize on the SADC disaster management strategy, because we've seen through Cyclone Idai that affected Mozambique, Malawi, and Zimbabwe that we actually do have a problem if we don't have any preparedness, mitigation, and response strategies. And COVID-19 actually made emphasis to this, and we feel that we need to have a regional disaster management strategy, both as environmental disasters, but also as health disasters. Lastly, Chair, we recommend that we maintain strong partnerships between all stakeholders, civil society organizations, communities that children stay and live in, government departments and ministries that are actually custodians of policies, the private sector as they infuse issues around livelihoods, and also in some instances facilitate for the fulfillment of children's rights, as well as the committee who are responsible for monitoring the implementation of the charter, as well as giving guidance on the implementation of this charter, as well as issues of child participation. This is all coming from non-state actors, particularly civil society organizations in the SADC region, and people who contributed to the report include all the 11 CRINSA national networks in 11 countries. And we wish you fruitful deliberations as we go forward to the official opening on the 30th. As I conclude, Chair, allow me to invite all of you to the 17th CSO Forum that will be taking place on Saturday, the 28th, from 12 o'clock East African time until 4 o'clock. Thank you so much.
I think we lost you there.
Hello?
Yeah. Okay. Anyways, you were concluding the information that you provided about Saturday didn't come out clearly. Maybe you can type it in the chat. But thank you very much for the presentation. We of course allowed it to go for about 20 minutes because it was scheduled to be shared with others, but there was no other organizations that were present. The information that you provided is very useful. There are a number of things that I appreciated. First of all, I appreciated the fact that you emphasized initially the progress that has been made before coming to some of the shortcomings, and I think that's a very important approach. The second is that you've not just only emphasized issues pertaining to civil and political rights, but also those that actually pertain to economic, social, and cultural rights. I also welcome the remarks that you made around the end, which emphasized the COVID situation. But of course, some of the points that you made in terms of the absence of a SADC child protocol and some of the added values that could potentially have for the sub-region to be embarked upon are part of the remarks that you made. I don't want to try to summarize a presentation that was clear and made within 20 minutes. So what I propose at this point in time is to open the floor for any comments, questions. The floor is open. I'm not seeing any indications. Anybody who, let me start from the committee members. Do any of the committee members want to take the floor?
Can I take the floor?
Go ahead, please.
Yes. Unfortunately, I can't see the icon for raising my hand, but I just really want to thank Felicitas for a very comprehensive report. My comment to her would be because civil society organizations are an oversight organization, I wondered what sort of interaction they have had with member states to see how they can address some of the shortcomings that they have addressed, especially in terms of policy coordination. I think most of the countries that gave presentations today actually spoke about their inadequacy as far as policy coordination is concerned, that issues of children are handled by by several government departments and different actors within their systems. So I'm wondering what civil society is doing to ensure that there's a check, and also that beyond that, governments are making very strong commitments to improve their operations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Maria, for that question. Please, over to you. If you can reflect on the question that was raised.
Thank you so much, Honorable, for the question. I hope I'm audible.
You are.
Thank you. So in terms of...
Sorry, there was a background noise. If you can please turn off your microphones, but please proceed.
Okay, great. In terms of what we are doing, civil society organizations are really working very hard in engaging with governments, and recently we've started working in earnest, engaging with members of parliament, so that beyond working with technocrats, now we can have members of parliament that are asking the right questions to portfolio ministries in parliament, but also table motions in parliament as well. One of the things that we are advocating for is the human rights institutions to be functional, and functional in such a way that they are moved away from government entities and be a separate entity that can have autonomy and be able to address some of these issues. Secondly, we have also now of recent really working with UNICEF to embrace the African Charter, because what we are also seeing in SADC is that a lot of SADC member states are working on the UNCRC because UNICEF is there with the technical support and so on, at the detriment of the African Charter. And what we have been reminding both government and UNICEF is that these are African children. We are in Africa, and therefore we need to foremost be aligned to the African Charter and then to the global aspirations. And I must say that it's now bearing fruits, because we are seeing a lot of collaboration activities at country level. As of last week, there has been a series of activities commemorating the Charter and the Convention, and those activities were activities that we were collaborating with both government and UNICEF. We feel, however, that if we can get the regional framework on board, it will be much easier now to have SADC member states binding themselves to this, because it's not about them as a sovereign state, but it's now as a collective, as a region. So those are some of the aspects that we are dealing with. But like we indicated, we really do have a lot of issues at national level in the different member states within the region. So the emphasis now really is to influence policy and practice at this level of implementation of national laws on children, as well as the service provision at that level. So those are some of the aspects that really, when you look at them, we find ourselves having to work with. But having said that, Honorable, I think also we are appealing to the committee as well to really do emphasize working with the structures that are existing at country and at regional level, because sometimes even the participation of government and the participation of SADC as an entity in these issues at Africa level, I'm sure you've seen that it takes quite a long time to get commitment of participation or get commitment of presentation. And those are our lived experiences on day-to-day basis as civil society organizations. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for those remarks as a response to the question raised. Does anybody want to take the floor? Again, priority to my colleagues, but anyone else?
Honorable Abu Bakrin is raising his hand, Honorable Chair.
Okay. Honorable Abu Bakrin, you have the floor.
Bonjour.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I think that regarding the National Code for Civil Society and its partners, as you know, the CSOs are very important as an alternative for the implementation of the chart. And it's very important that the coordination should be effective and concrete to try, and we have to work together to try and coordinate and to bring forward the rights of the child. As far as Southern Africa is concerned, we've seen many examples of coordination amongst the countries of Southern Africa, but when there is more coordination and where there's more synergy amongst the interventions, one sees that the members of the committee can better articulate and follow what the developments. When there's a perfect coordination between the state and the civil society. That's very important in implementing the measures, because, and then when you've got a work on the ground taking place, and then that's maximized and it becomes efficient. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for that remark. Anyone else? Otherwise, we're coming to we're drawing to a close. Anyone else? Okay, so I'm going to give the opportunity for the presenter if you have a final remark, briefly, please, and then we will close. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. I think it's just to thank you for the opportunity. We need more of these engagements, Chair, engagements that can help us to map a concrete way forward in terms of how do we work together? How do we make all of these gaps identified to be addressed? At what point do we facilitate one stakeholder to start and the other one to continue, such that ultimately we can service the child on the ground and service them effectively and efficiently? So in essence, we are just saying that if we reach out, please, we would need that assistance. So you should also be able to assist us, because ultimately we all want to reach the same goal of the Africa that we want, an Africa that is fit for children. Thank you so much. And yes, you are invited to the 17th CSO Forum meeting, which is happening this Saturday from 12 noon East African time to 4 o'clock. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your
Mr. Chair, can I?
Please.
Mr.
Honorable, yes, please go ahead.
Yes, Mushira Khattab. Can I take the floor?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Just quickly to reiterate what I mentioned to the distinguished representatives of member states, I would like to address the CSOs and our partners and remind them with the UN Global Study on Children Deprived of Their Liberty, presented in October 2019 to the UN General Assembly, and kindly recommend members of the civil society and other stakeholders to monitor carefully the implementation of this study. It is the third of this nature following the Graça Machel report on children and armed conflict and the Paulo Pinheiro report on violence against children. Really, the study is very important. It found out that more than 7 million children worldwide are deprived of liberty in various types of child-specific institutions, immigration detention centers, police custodies, prisons, and other places of detention. And really, it is well accepted that this is a form of violence against children with very serious and sometimes irreversible consequences to their physical and mental health. So I would kindly appeal to you to consider this as a matter of priority and help member states to take action to reduce the number of children held in places of detention and other places of deprivation of liberty, and to take rehabilitation and corrective measures with them. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to take the floor once again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mushira Khattab. Thank you for that important reminder about the global study. The chair has kindly asked me to close the meeting on his behalf. I would like to thank all those that have made our session today productive. The state presenters, the civil society, national human rights institution, but of course my colleagues, the interpreters, and colleagues from the secretariat as well, and those in attendance. Tomorrow we will resume the same time as today. The focus will be on West Africa, and have a good afternoon, and see you tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Honorable.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you and see you tomorrow.
Okay.
See you
Bye.
tomorrow. Same time tomorrow, huh? Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, interpreters. Tomorrow at same time as usual. Didier, you may close the meeting now. Thank you very much, Didier.
On the right in welfare of the child. So what we want is nothing for us without us. We want to participate. Right now, there are children living in conflict regions like the DRC. I'm not from the DRC, but I may have solutions on what those children, how those children could be saved. I have a better understanding on what they're going through. I'm a child, so I understand what the other child is going through. So in the next 30 years, if the world embraces the inner child in the whole world, I think we'll be creating a better solution.